What's up, people? Welcome to my YouTube channel. If you haven't been here, where I talk about a variety of topics. Something a little different and more personal today, though. It's about some of my actual experience, usually talking a little more objectively and detached from things. And there is a little bit of that in this topic as well, but I'm mainly talking from experience about my life to this point. I'm 34 years old as a gifted person and what impact that has had on employment. So, when I was 7 or 8 years old, my parents put me through extensive psychological and social testing, just a variety of things, between IQ tests and reading comprehension tests and just rational, cognitive tests. And I came out gifted, which puts me in the range between 130 IQ and 144. 145 and up is like super gifted genius type level. I'm more toward the lower end of the gifted range, so low to mid 130s, just based on what I know about IQ studies and the traits associated with the levels, and also some little tests online that I've taken as well. So I'm on the lower end of the gifted range, but nevertheless, I share all of the same strengths and struggles that you find in any uh, you know gifted person's situation for the most part. I mean, there are personality traits that vary on every level of the IQ spectrum. That can be explained through big five traits, even astrological and human design charts and things like that, which are some of my interests personally and professionally to an extent. But yeah, IQ and all of the nuances of what that is, that's a conversation for another time. Just kind of talking about employment and what impact my giftedness has had on my employment. So growing up in school, I didn't take an interest in school. I didn't care about it. Never studied at all. Math was my weakest subject, and I would get B's and C's in math. Everything else was A's and a few B's here and there, like maybe in the more math heavy subjects like the hard sciences, because just wasn't really an area of interest of mine. I'm more of a creative type. I now play drums. I was always into the performance arts to a large degree, and was rather underachieving in those areas. And that is one of the traits of being a gifted person, especially with uh, low conscientiousness on a big five scale. Something that plagues a lot of us gifted people is that we're underachievers, right? The other two students in my class that I grew up with, who were also considered gifted, one of them was the salutatorian, and the other was ranked third in our class by the time graduation rolled around. And by the way, the one ranked third was one of my cousins, and the one who was ranked second, the salutatorian, was one of my best friends throughout high school, and one of my creative partners who I did a lot of theater and skits and stuff with, played music with. So there was a coherence that I had with those other kids who I had actual relation to. I was in proximity to them. We had some of the same interests, or came from some of the same blood, you know? Uh, but apart from that, I did kind of struggle with peer relationships, people my age. All of my friends were older. People I played in bands with were older. They were like in college when I was still in high school. Um, Still to this day, I haven't been in a band with anyone who was my age or younger. Everyone's been older, more experienced than me. People who I could learn something from, rather than, oh, we're peers, we're friends, we're on the same level. Let's like take this road together. Like, no, I've always been on a solitary path. And that has shown in employment as well, to my detriment, but also to great benefit. So I'm 34 now. I am currently unemployed. However, due to certain good relationships that I've made in business and playing my cards right and making some intelligent moves in my little career tangents, I'm doing pretty well financially, even though I'm unemployed and not working for anyone. Uh, put enough eggs in the right baskets, and I'm currently building toward being as independent financially as possible with my lovely lady, who also has tremendous amount of talent and is gifted in her own right. And we're well, I'm not going to speak for us. I'll just say for me, I'm personally on quite a spiritual path, and a lot of my work revolves around that realm. Uh, and so I haven't been swayed by money necessarily in the past. That's been a strength as well as something that set me back in certain ways with regard to employment. It's just simply not worth it to me to stay in an employment situation that gives me very limited, if any, uh, you know, career growth potential and doesn't put my skills to use in the way that I know I need to embody them and apply them. So it's very easy for me to move on from things, to quit when I know I need to quit. There's a right moment, a right time. And no amount of money or material wealth or gain can sway me in the other direction. What's right is right. What's wrong is wrong. And I'm not going to stand for anything that isn't at least on the path to being right, on the path to being built toward something that is functional, aimed toward the good, based in truth, etc. Right? So that's more of a spiritual path type thing, but it's very related to my giftedness because I'm a very good listener. I'm very good at understanding things. I often get accused of cutting people off or interrupting because I actually understand what they're trying to say well before they finish their sentence or their monologue, right? So I don't see it as worth it as carrying on with this conversation for the sake of formality or being polite when I know what you're going to say already because I can follow a line of logic to its conclusion, right? Even further than the person who's taking that line of logic, right? So that's where my interest in philosophy came in and how it's very helpful, but also kind of makes me difficult in conversation sometimes is that it's like, no, dude, I get it. Like, we don't need to carry on, Also, what are you going to do with this information? What are you going to do about it? Are you going to be productive? Are you going to fix the problems that are being raised here? Or are you just going to fucking complain? Right. So that's been another problem with me in employment is people don't seem to want to fix problems. Not only don't they want to fix them, they don't even want to hear about the problems that exist that disrupt the little aura of comfort and efficiency that they have, even if it's fatally inefficient at its core and not based in what's true. And so, I've had to deal with, as a gifted person who can understand things very, very quickly, very easily, and very thoroughly with very little information. I was always the memo guy, writing, okay, this is what I see is like a problem here. It's going to turn into a much bigger problem unless we face it head on and do something about it, right? And and this is something I've had to get better at, but I'm quite good at now, is offering solutions, right? Anytime I raise a criticism that I know is an issue, I come in with at least one alternative solution and course of action with somewhat of a plan, an outline of a plan laid out so that I'm not just coming off as like raising gripes and not being productive, right? But still, even when you have a whole plan mapped out, and it doesn't matter whether you're working in a small business, a large business, uh, regardless of the personalities of the people involved. And I've worked on every level of different businesses from startups to, Fortune 50 companies and 500 companies where I was kind of just a cog in the machine for a little while. That didn't last very long. Uh, you know, I would write memos and people didn't want to hear what I had to say, even if I offered cut and dry solutions and a good prediction and a map on like how things would look once we implemented these solutions. requires more effort and brain power and often resources than people are willing to invest in for the sake of disrupting the often fatally inefficient and corrupt system that they have right here right now. People don't want to make change. And so I guess that's my main problem that I've had with employment, right? And why I don't plan on working for anyone ever again, at least in a W-2 employment type situation, right? Dude, contract me out to come in, tell you what the fuck is wrong with your operation, and to help you clean it up as quickly, as efficiently, and as intelligently as possible. Like, that's what I'm good for. I'm good at facing the things that people don't want to face, seeing the things further down the road than people are capable of or are willing to think about right now, and trying to attack it at its root before it fucking blows up into an unmanageable and chaotic situation, right? I've worked in crisis management before. I've worked in, as a controller in first response, like deliberating and controlling for as many variables as I can and coming up with a plan to literally save people's lives, to mitigate the risk of loss of life, and that kind of systematic and essentially like IQ is good for it. If you're in the gifted range or above, you're good at foreseeing those things, anticipating things before they happen, problems before they happen, and correcting in the short term so that you don't have as many long-term issues, right? You can't see and control for everything. No system is perfect, right? But you have to also be flexible and adaptable, right? And so that's another thing as a gifted person that you really got to, I guess, cultivate, which I've had to cultivate, is the flexibility of, okay, they don't want to face the problems right now. How do I artfully communicate things little by little to inch toward solving these bigger problems that no one can see or is willing to see, right? Because remember, like, IQ is the ability to solve problems within a closed system. But then if you're also kind of spiritually inclined and have a background in, say, philosophy and systems of, the metaphysics of reality, like I do, then you can also see beyond those systems and what kinds of logical implications are entailed by you sticking to a kind of view of reality, a metaphysical view of the world, right? And these systems are instilled in businesses, in interpersonal relationships, in political systems, in social systems, in everything that we do to be efficient and to maintain our flow of resources for the sake of everyone's survival, right? There are values that we ultimately need to appeal to that are much higher than the material, that are higher than mere survival itself, if we want to not only survive, but flourish as a society and as individuals who all have our unique talents, skills, and abilities that God gave us, and that if we don't put them to use in this life, we're going to be horribly unhappy, depressed, and just not be able to share with the world what we have to offer, right? That's where fulfillment comes from, is giving of yourself in a free way, so that nature responds to you, and that includes the social world, in also providing back the resources that you deserve by implementing your skills in a way that's valuable to people and to society and to the world and to God, your spiritual path, whatever you're on. Okay, so because when we look at, say, Dr. David Hawkins' work of the map of consciousness, that like, only 20% of people are, on this path of courage and like trying to do the right thing. Man, there are so many people who are like right on the cusp of that 200 line, if you're familiar with the map of consciousness scale, where like above 200 is like reason and integrity, and below 200 is materialism and survival, right? Where people act out of desperation for their own self-interest, right? There's so many people who are right on the cusp of that 200 line, who are they might be trapped in the survival paradigm, but they're so close and they're so thirsty and hungry for something more out of life. They know there's something on the other edge, but they don't have the courage to dive, 2 feet in themselves and take a path by themselves in life and to explore the unknown, right? So people who are on the other side of that 200 line have a duty to uh, kind of be the test dummies, yes, but also to educate, to teach, right? And that's something that I've always felt a duty to do. That's why I teach philosophy, but I don't work for universities because of the state of universities, how they're intellectually and spiritually corrupt. But I teach classes in like community education settings where I can teach what I want, how I want. And working for myself has tremendous benefit, and those benefits outweigh the negatives of maybe not having the short and medium term security that you would working a job, right? So basically what I'm saying is I'm done working jobs. I'm done working for people. I'm done filing a double W-2 tax form. I'm not doing it anymore, okay? Because doing the right thing for me and putting my skills to use involves educating people on the systems and helping them develop their own systems for business, for relationships, for life, so that they can be as independent and take as intelligent of moves as possible so that they maximize the positives, all the positives out of life, and control for as many negatives as they can. We don't always know exactly what we want, but we do, through experience, learn what we don't want and what doesn't work. And that's information, right? We can weed those things out. We can spot those red flags before they become problems, before we tolerate things, and then start to grow bitter and resent ourselves for having tolerated this thing that we should have foreseen to begin with, and didn't account for. So like these are the kinds of things that I personally have a talent for, but also wanted to put that into a bit of a packaging of my own experience and working for various employers in multiple industries of various size businesses, and why it just hasn't worked out overall to this point. I've made lots of good contacts, which are still good networking people in my life, but I've also had bridges kind of burned because I was so diametrically opposed in my vision to what someone else was who I was working for. And at the end of the day, it wasn't my place to fight any longer. So I would quit, and I've never had a problem saying no to situations that didn't serve me in the long run. Right. So with, giftedness has come a certain amount of courage and assertiveness that's due to other personality traits as per Big Five and whatnot as well that can be measured. But, the bottom line is that, cultivating the art of saying no will ultimately get you to the best place the quickest, and to teach you what is the right thing for you to do in life. And so, I've never been fired from a job because I've never actually given people, legal or possibly policy-based grounds for firing me. But I have been taken off the schedule without explanation because they weren't able to outsmart my reasoning, or they weren't willing to deal with the very real problems that I was raising. They saw me, HR is just like, I've never gotten along with HR. They've always seen me as a nuisance, and I've always seen them as a totalitarian, tyranny, basically, which they generally are. They're meant to safeguard a company from their own employees. That doesn't work well for me, because if the goals aren't about truth and goodness above all, I don't want to be a part of it, right? So I suppose that's it, right? That's been my experience working for people, being employed as a gifted person who's also on a spiritual path and also feels a duty to serve people in that way, right? So anyway, probably talking more about giftedness and my experiences and whatnot in future videos, but that's just been, you know, how it relates to employment. So cheers.